Hello everybody, Jack Powers, your host for this episode of Infamous Federal Prisoners. And today we're going to be talking about a crime syndicate, a gang that originated in New York City in the early 1960s. And it was on the west side of Manhattan. It was aptly called the Westies. And the leader, the most recent leader anyway, was a fellow by the name of Jimmy Coonan. So we're going to call this episode Jimmy Coonan. Now I know that there's been a lot of episodes about Jimmy Coonan, the Westies, etc. As usual, I want to take a little different spin on it. This episode is really about a fellow by the name of Mickey Featherstone. Francis Featherstone is his real name. And we'll get to his involvement, we'll get to his part in this. But a little bit of background that I know is that the Westies developed in the early 60s in Manhattan, the west side of Manhattan. Pretty lucrative area, I think. They were actually praised by the Gambino crime family and probably others for their craziness, for how ruthless and I guess reckless and just violent they were. They had a reputation. They didn't always have a reputation. The first leader was a fellow by the name of Michael Spillane, and he was sort of a gentle kind of a dude, I guess, in terms of organized crime. He didn't really go in for the all-out craziness and the just off-the-charts, off-the-chain type violence that the Westies under Jimmy Coonan a little bit later on went in for. So, you know, he was widely respected, but as things go, he was moved out of the way. And, you know, whether there's very few gangsters, like leaders of gangs, that just age out or that make it all the way through the labyrinth of gang life in those situations. You've got a lot of guys underneath you all over the place who are looking to come up. And a lot of them, they have no problem with taking out the leader and assuming that role for themselves or for somebody else that they're closely associated with. So, you know, it's human nature. You want to climb that ladder. You want to gain that position. You want to be the leader. You want to... but I don't really... To me, it doesn't seem like a good idea to be the leader, because then you have a bullseye, you have a target on your back or on the middle of your forehead or between your eyes or whatever. People are going to be out for you. They're going to be trying to kill you if you're the leader, or they're going to be trying to prosecute you and put you in prison forever. So Mickey Featherstone was this dude who he signed up, volunteered to go to Vietnam when he was 17 years old. He looks like a choir boy, Mickey Featherstone. Everybody described him as just an innocent-looking young lad, very youthful-looking, very innocent-looking. But the story of Mickey Featherstone to me is so interesting because it's an exercise in paradox. You've got this young kid, 17 years old. You volunteer for Vietnam. Not only does he volunteer to go and serve in Vietnam, but he convinces the higher ups to consider him for Green Beret training. And he indeed becomes a Green Beret in Vietnam. And my dad was in Vietnam, 1966 through 68. He was there, you know, during when it started getting really janky. And he sent a lot of photos, a lot of pictures home. I can remember as a little kid, we had a calendar, and it was shaped like a helmet. And it was divided into the days of the month. And each one of us would take our turn crossing a big X through it. You know, hung it in the refrigerator. And we were counting the days till he would be home. But my dad would send all these photos to us. He'd write these letters all the time. And he was big on photography. And he would send all these letters and photos. And some of them were pretty gruesome stuff. I mean, I remember seeing piles of human bones, skulls, and backbones, and all kinds of things in a great big pile. I remember that they actually had a deceased North Vietnamese prisoner that, you know, I know this appeared in some movie, but they actually had a guy that they called Charlie, that they sat in a chair and put a cigarette in his mouth and a drink in his hand, and you know, there was just another one was of all these ears that they had cut off of all of the enemy and had like on a string. I remember it just going across from pole to pole, and it was all ears. You know, I don't know why he was sending little kids pictures like that, but we saw all that stuff. We saw the horrible, gruesome terror. And then, of course, when the real story started coming out, some years and even decades later, we found out what that war was really all about, and how traumatic, how vicious, how absolutely extreme these people had to be. Green Beret, of course, is a special operations force, probably the highest. I mean, I grew up with the Green Beret song. I'm trying to remember it exactly. Silver wings upon his chest, making one of America's best. It was just, the Green Beret are like the top echelon of special services in the military. And Mickey Featherstone, at 17, qualified for training and passed the training and became a Green Beret in Vietnam. So what that had to look like behind the scenes, what this young Mickey Featherstone, an Irish guy from New York City, presumably the west side of Manhattan Island, yeah, I mean, you know, your imagination can kind of run wild with these things, but I can assure you that he was involved in numerous torture for information, sessions, campaigns, whatever, captured. You know, when the regular troops would capture the enemy, they would turn them over to the Green Beret. Green Beret would work with the CIA, virtually two different segments of basically the same operations, interchangeable, probably worked hand in glove, and had these places, these techniques for extracting information from the enemy. And then what do you do once you've gleaned whatever information you can glean from the enemy and feel that there's nothing more left? You don't just take the ropes off their wrists or let them hobble away into the jungle. You kill them, right? You take them out somewhere and put a bullet in their head. So I think this is where Mickey Featherstone got his mob or murder mentality. I think that it started then in Vietnam as a Green Beret, when they bring these prisoners in, tie them to a pole, tie them to a chair. You got control of their body. Now you can do all kinds of things to them to cause all kinds of injury, all kinds of pain, vicious stuff, inhuman stuff, stuff that just goes beyond the pale, that isn't even, I mean, decent human beings would never even, they wouldn't even think of that stuff. And you know, it's just kind of, I guess it's kind of sickening, at least to me, to even think that human beings could do that stuff to one another, torture other human beings like they have. And I myself have been the victim of actual torture. So this is not anything that's funny. This is real. This is true. I was actually a victim of actual torture, and it's no fun. It's nothing to laugh at or goof around with. Serious business when you're the victim. You know, I had officers stand out in the hallway laughing while this was happening, while I was chained down for over 7 days on a concrete and steel slab, no mattress, no nothing, high stress position, dehydrated, hallucinating, you know, wanting to die. If I'd had a handgun or any way to kill myself quickly at that moment, I would have, without hesitation. No question about it. So yeah, it's nothing that's funny. This is real stuff. And Mickey Featherstone brought Vietnam, like a lot of veterans did, back to the United States. He brought his experiences there back home. And, you know, when you have to be in one mode and then you have to switch to another mode of civilian life, just doesn't work for some people. So for Mickey Featherstone, he came back probably, I don't know when he came back exactly, not that familiar with it, but whenever he came back, probably late 60s, early 70s, for sure. By 72, he was back home. He joined up with the Westies. He was right there on the spot. And he became a really vicious killer for the Westies. And at that time, you know, early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, the Gambino crime father, the godfather, was Paul Castellano. And he called for, the Westies were getting such a reputation for their viciousness and their violence. And I mean, that's how you control things if you are an organized crime syndicate. You can try to control, like Michael Spillane did, with a little bit of grace, a little bit of intelligence, a little bit of finesse rather than force. Or you can just go full out and just start doing all kinds of whack shit and make people just absolutely terrified of you, so that you know, so that you alleviate a lot of problems right up front. Trouble with being nice or trying to use finesse is that a lot of people will take your so-called kindness for weakness, and that's not a good thing. If you're in the organized crime business, you want people to fear you. You want them to be scared shitless whenever they see you, and they were. People were scared to death, and the guy was small. He was only 5'7", maybe 155 pounds at the most, probably less. He was a small dude. He had a choir boy, a cherub-like youthful look to it. nobody, when people would see him, and they'd hear that's Mickey Featherstone, nobody could believe that it was the same person, but it was. And so Coonan moved in. He became the top dog. Coonan didn't trust the Italians. I was with Jimmy Coonan in Terre Haute, 1994, USP Terre Haute, when he was there on Unit 2E. And, he was quiet in prison. He didn't really talk to many people, mainly just stayed by himself. He was a little bit heavy in the gut, a little portly. He went out on the yard, he walked a lot. There were a couple guys that he talked to, but mainly just very quiet, never into any prison politics, or there was no sign that he was active as a gang leader or the leader of an organized crime syndicate. He just, I'm sure that they closely monitored him, or at least as close as they could, but he never got an incident report. He was never in the mix with anything. He was always very polite, very quiet, almost shy, actually. And he had some medical issues that he was dealing with at the time I knew him. And so he was in some pain, and he got those dealt with eventually. But he wasn't, he wasn't the kind of prisoner that average people would think he would be as the leader of the Westies. So in the early 70s, Paul Castellano calls for a sit-down with Coonan because he wants to sit down, he wants to talk with him, he wants to have some business dealings, he wants to, have some coordinated efforts going on. Probably what Castellano was thinking of is possibly, seeing what they're up to, maybe trying to take over some of their rackets or whatever. That's just the nature of the business, right? But as the meeting began, the Italians evidently began to question the Irish mobster about an Italian loan shark who had been murdered. Coonan denied outright any involvement in that, which was an outright lie. Come to find out, it was an outright lie. But yeah, what are you going to do? You're meeting with the Godfather, and he asks about this murder of a loan shark, an Italian loan shark, and you happen to be an Irish leader of the Westies. Yeah, you're probably going to deny that, probably deny any involvement in that, and that's what he did. So the Gambino Godfather, seemingly happy with this response, then suggested that the Westies should come under the protection of the Gambino crime family, and that they should stop acting like cowboys. In other words, Paul Castellano was trying to tamp it down a little bit. But we'll have to finish this up. We're at the end of our time right now for today. We'll finish all of this. We just got into the good part 2. We'll finish this in part 2, guaranteed. Part 2 of Jimmy Coonan and the Westies coming up. If you want to, and it would help a lot, buy one of my books, Amazon.com. You can see them all behind me. There's even more than these that I've written. I'm going to write another one about my experiences since I've been out, because yeah, that's another whole story. But I appreciate you subscribing, and look, hit the like, hit the share button. Let's make this books, Amazon.com. You can see them all behind me. There's even more than these that I've written. I'm going to write another one about my experiences since I've been out, because yeah, that's another whole story. But I appreciate you subscribing, and look, hit the like, hit the share button. You know, let's make this thing move a little bit. Thank you, my friends. See you next time.